Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name's Phil and I'm a senior lecturer in astrophysics at the University of Lincoln, and I thought I'd do another fun one with some chocolates because I like eating chocolates and it's just a good excuse to kind of eat some more chocolates. But this time around I'm going to look at different sorts of stars, and I've got this kind of variety pack here. If you can see that, there we go. And I'll be honest, there's not a lot left in there. I've kind of ate some already, but I've got a few left to kind of do this video. And in this particular pack, there are 4 different sorts. So there you go. I've got a white chocolate one, a dark chocolate one, a hazelnut one, and just your regular kind of milk chocolate. And I'm going to start with the milk chocolate one. And the idea here is, if these were stars, which star types would they more likely represent? Not necessarily in texture, but maybe kind of in flavor, maybe color, things like that. So what star would I assign these to if I was going to do that? So I'm going to start with the milk chocolate one. So the milk chocolate one here, it's kind of pretty standard flavor. It's a stable flavor. It's always been around. You can always kind of guarantee that you're going to enjoy it. Who doesn't like a milk chocolate anyway? Now I'm going to assign this, or not assign it, I'm going to go for a K-type star here. Now these are a little bit cooler than the sun. They are not particularly very hot, so they're a bit cooler than the sun. They're fairly stable, so they don't kind of just erupt into supernovas. They live fairly long lives. Because they're fairly stable, they live quite long lives. So I'm going to kind of think of this as kind of like your regular milk chocolate, really, because they're always going to be around. They've always been around. You can always depend on it. You can always depend on a K-type star. It's not going to be significantly variable and things like that. So let's have a look. And I think actually it's been pretty hot the last few days here in the UK, and I believe some of these have actually started to melt. So yeah, you can see it's melted quite a bit there. So let's have a quick taste of that. Nice and soft, but texture-wise and size, I suppose that could be similar to a kind of K-type star, really. You're not going to have massive layering in that. Something like a red giant, you might have different layers of fusion occurring, things like that. It's not a particularly complex star, so fairly straightforward, smooth, all the same flavour kind of all the way through. Now, for my next star or chocolate, I'm going to go for the milk chocolate one here, and I'm going to go for an A-type star. Now, A-type stars typically are, well, they are hotter. They're hotter than the sun, and colour-wise, they look kind of white. So if you look out into the night sky at night and you see a white star, it's likely going to be an A-type star. Now, why have I gone for milk chocolate for an A-type star? Okay, colour's one of them, but they're more intense in the sense they're hotter. Doesn't really match kind of the flavour of the milk chocolate. But if you eat a lot of chocolate, and I'd like to eat a lot more chocolate, then you'll realise that the white chocolate, as I should say, this is a white chocolate, they melt a lot quicker than milk chocolate or dark chocolate. So this represents the shorter lives that an A-type star would have. So A-type stars, they're hotter, they burn through their fuel quicker, they don't last very long, they last shorter lives than your K-type ones, and your bigger stars that are not the bigger stars, I should say, smaller stars. Actually, this will be your actual physical bigger star. So it represents kind of what happens to the chocolate. The chocolate will melt on your tongue a lot quicker than a dark chocolate or a milk chocolate. So the white chocolate one doesn't last very long. It's also kind of the right colour for an A-type star. Inside wise, it isn't really going to match, I suppose, what the star is like, but those few things would make me think of an A-type star. So this one doesn't look like it's melted that much compared to the other ones. So let's have a look what this is like inside. So nice and smooth all the way throughout. And interestingly, if we look at the spectrum of light coming off these stars, they have very smooth spectrum or spectral features. They don't have any high emission lines, bumps, any kind of really deep absorption lines. So that kind of matches the spectrum actually of an A-type star. It's very smooth, as is the chocolate. So my next chocolate star combo is going to be neutron star pulsar. I'm going to match it with dark chocolate this time. Now, why I've gone for dark chocolate and a neutron star pulsar, they're kind of the same sort of thing. Just one is just sending a pulsar out to us, but basically structure-wise, they're kind of quite similar. Neutron stars are very, very dense, very massive stars. They're not very big physically, they're just very dense. So they can weigh more than the sun, but they might be the size of a large city, so like 20 kilometers. So very dense. I'm expecting hard chocolate. So dark chocolate is typically quite hard, crunchy, brittle, and texture-wise, that kind of matches neutron stars, pulsars. They're a lot more dense. They're going to be harder. Color-wise, doesn't really kind of match that really. They're going to be quite hot actually, so the color doesn't really go there. However, you're going to get a lot more complex flavors with a dark chocolate compared to the other ones like a milk chocolate or a white chocolate, and that represents the more intense nature of these stars. They're very fast rotating, very high density. So fast rotating, they can rotate hundreds of times a second, have huge magnetic fields and things like that. So you get more complexity there. And you're going to get that more complex nature in the actual flavor of a dark chocolate as well. So it should be a lot firmer, a lot stronger flavor. And also dark chocolates are kind of one of my favorite as well. So I'm going to enjoy this one. So let's kind of see how this one's getting on inside. Again, internal structure-wise, these aren't a good match to the actual stars. It's more about matching maybe their flavor, their colour or something like that, and stuff like that. So, a lot firmer than the other chocolates, a lot more intense flavour. Again, for me, that's the star that I'm going to put on. Technically, they're not really a star, they're a stellar remnant. Again, what is left over from when a star dies, a very large star, that leaves that really dense central core. But anyway, my favourite chocolate, and it matches kind of in complexity of flavour and a bit firmer in texture as well. And then for my final star chocolate combo, I'm going for the hazelnut one and I'm going for a red giant. Now, red giant stars are what the sun might evolve into when it's finished fusion in its core. What happens there is you then kind of get a collapse of the core, it draws in more hydrogen to fuse, and then you get a fusion of hydrogen in a shell around that, which is actually a bigger volume than it was originally. It causes a greater outward pressure, which makes the star kind of swell up and it becomes a red giant. You then end up with kind of layering inside. So depending on the size of the star, you might get a different layer fusing and then it filters down to the next one. So it's a bit like an onion inside. It's a lot more complex internal structure than maybe something like a different star. And with this, we've got obviously milk chocolate. We've then got hazelnut. Now, having eaten quite a few of these before I did this video, they don't have a solid hazelnut in the center. Instead, it's kind of little bits of hazelnut scattered kind of throughout the outer part. So it's an extra flavor that adds complexity to the chocolate, which can kind of match the complexity of a red giant in its layering, the fact that it's puffed up. It's no longer fusing hydrogen in its core, it's doing it kind of a little bit further out. So that's kind of why I've gone for this. You know, if I actually have a look inside of this, it's not good to represent that layering that we're on about, but it's more kind of about the actual flavor itself, which is a bit more complex. You've got more things going off there. You've got different layers that might be fusing and filtering down. So maybe you've got a helium fusing shell outside of, or should I say inside of a hydrogen fusing shell. So you've got kind of treat those as different flavors, I suppose, in the chocolate. So I believe this one has melted quite a bit. Again, we're pretty hot here in the UK at the moment. So we'll have a look, and from what I remember, it has got little bits of hazelnut inside. It hasn't got that big hazelnut inside, which I kind of like actually. So very soft, mostly because it's kind of melted. But then you've got little bits of hazelnut inside again. They might represent some of those different layers, different flavors can then work like that. So thank you for kind of watching me taste some chocolate. It's a good excuse for me to try some chocolate. Maybe you learned something about some stars. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But this was just a sample of some of the chocolates, the Lindt Lindor chocolates that they do. And they do lots of different ones. If you want me to do all the different sorts, let me know. Any other ideas, let me know in the comments. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you kind of enjoy this little bit more fun video. I enjoy doing them because I get to eat chocolate. But anyway, thank you.